What's going on, everybody? It's Neil from 2AF. We're going to talk about something today we don't talk about a whole bunch, and that is these small little J-frame revolvers. Now, Smith & Wesson and Lipsey's just put out a new gun that kind of has people talking about revolvers a little bit more lately. But we're going to start by talking about, like, this is my own Smith & Wesson 340 PD. I have had this gun for, it's got to be 20 years. If it's not 20 years, it's like 19 or something like that. Now, a little backstory, back then, way early 2000s, when you wanted a small, lightweight gun, like this fits in your hand, palm of your hand really, super lightweight, right? So this is the Airlight model, and so you can see we're under 12 ounces here. If you wanted a small gun that, and here's the important part, that shot a caliber that was suitable for self-defense. You didn't want a 25, you didn't want a 32. 380 was even like maybe you were on the fence about it. If you wanted a gun that shot something that was in a normal handgun caliber, your list of guns to pick from was small, right? Now, there were some semi-automatic 9mm guns that were pretty small. You know, you had like the Rohrbaugh, but those were pretty difficult to find and pretty expensive. They were very finicky with ammo. You had like the Car Arms, which were finicky with no matter what you put in there. You really couldn't get those guns to run reliably over a long period of time. And aside from that, there weren't really that many other guns. Glock 43 didn't exist. SIG 365 didn't exist. Ruger EC9 or whatever it was didn't exist. Springfield XDS didn't exist. None of those guns existed. Smith & Wesson Shield didn't exist. None of those guns were out. So if you wanted a gun that was small, light, thin, this is a very thin gun with the exception of the cylinder here, it's super skinny, that shot a suitable self-defense round, your list was small, and I bet you that a J-frame revolver or a subcompact revolver was on that list, probably pretty close to the top. Now, here's the things that really kind of stunk about these guns, right? So, one, only 5 shots. Pretty much all of them only had 5 shots. More recently, we started to see some of the Colts come out that were 6-shot and the Kimbers that are 6-shot revolvers. But even those, they're a little bigger than these and heavier. The smallest, lightest revolvers, it was just 5 rounds. That's all you got. Double action only, man. It was pretty heavy trigger pull. Not unbearable, not unmanageable, but they were heavy. Now, this one's had some trigger work done to it, so it is smoother. And smoother is probably even more important than it is lighter than the factory trigger pull, but this is a smoother trigger pull. 2-finger grip, right? You can only fit 2 fingers on it. And they were pretty thin, so there's really not a whole lot to hold on to. And I used the Crimson Trace laser grip on these, and the reason I did that was because the sight sucked, right? Front sight, not a big deal. It was fine. The rear sight sucked. Look how terrible that is. Let me see if I can get it to focus on that. You know, there's just nothing there, right? It's just this little tiny cut in the top of the gun, and you somehow had to try and line that up and level the front sight with this tiny little cut here. They just were terrible. They were slow to use. They were difficult to use. The sights on these were just the worst part of the gun, right? So especially this one, this is the Airlight model, and the Airlight model was expensive, right? So we had a titanium cylinder with a scandium frame. So expensive materials. That's what made it so light. But I mean, this was like $1,000 revolver before it had the trigger job, before it had the Crimson Trace grip on it. So it was expensive. There was a pretty good alternative in the 642s and the 442s, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about now. This is the new one that's come out from Smith & Wesson in collaboration with Taylor Group or Lipsey's. Now, the 642 and the 442, they've been out for about ever, right? 642 and 442 are mostly the same. 642 is this aluminum color, because that's what it was. It's an aluminum frame with a stainless cylinder. The 442 was the same thing, except it was just all black. But these are the 642, and the one not seen here is the 442 UC. Now, I think the UC stands for Ultimate Carry, and we've got some noticeable improvements that come right out of the box. This is how the gun comes, right? Nothing's been added on here. Comes like this right out of the box. Now, because this is aluminum and stainless, it's not as light as the titanium and scandium one. Still pretty light, though. I think it's over a pound. Yeah, so just a half an ounce over a pound on this model. And this one's not 357. It shoots 38 special. Plus P, it'll handle plus P, and that is a suitable round for self-defense in my opinion. But here's the upgrades on it, or at least some of the upgrades. It's got a nicer trigger. I mean, I've read that it's titanium trigger pins here. I don't know what that does. I'm sorry. I'm not informed enough to tell you what that does. But I can tell you the trigger is a little bit lighter and smoother than on your stock 642 and 442. Your chambers here in the cylinder are chamfered. We've got this kind of tapers down a little bit here in the front. We've got the VZ grips. They're still 2 fingers, right? But they're a little fatter left to right. You can see it gets skinnier and then it kind of bows out here, and it fills in your hand a lot nicer than your standard J-frame revolver grips do. But really what I liked about these is, God, you got a good rear sight. So it's a U-notch. Let me see if you can see that. It's a U-notch serrated rear sight that's just way easier to use. You can probably see this compared to trying to see the other one. Just a lot easier to use rear sight. Front sight's still very good. This is the XS tritium front sight that has a fluorescent green ring around the tritium insert in the front sight. So a lot nicer gun than your standard 642 and 442. They're more expensive as well. They're also kind of allocated. They're not around everywhere. Not everybody has them all the time. But as they keep becoming available, we'll keep getting them here. Again, this is a 642. The 442 is the same thing, except it's all black. And instead of black and gray grips, it has the VZ black cherry grips, which are like a black and red. So super nice guns. Check them out over on 2af.com. While you're there, get signed up for email notifications. That's always the best way to get notices about what's going on around the warehouse, what's coming in the warehouse, what's shipping out of the warehouse. And that is your most reliable way to keep in touch with what's happening here. Of course, you can always contact me, Neil at 2af.com. Give a call, 904-593-6921, or just message me on any one of these social media platforms. That'd be fine. So again, Smith & Wesson 642 UC. Check them out over on 2af.com.